you want to do the roll call, Stefan or Adam, or should I do it?
Do it. Brian Rogers is not here. Adam Mulfer is also not here. Jay Ward,
Present?
Ann Karazinski,
Here.
Lisa Thorne,
Here.
Joe Parisi, here. Pete Delaney, here. Jessica Ramsey Sanchez, not here. And alternate hopeful Wayne Licklider.
Here. Here.
All right. Okay. We do have a full board today, so we can proceed.
Okay. Before we go any further, though, I need to seat two of the three alternates for absent board members. I'm going to seat Wayne for Brian, and I'm going to seat Joe.
I can't, I'm not sworn in yet. You've got to deal with that. I'm
Joe, you're going to be seated for Brian. And Pete, you're going to be seated for Adam. Okay? And later on, when we lose a board member, we'll be four of us, which may or may not be an issue. Okay, so let's start with approval of minutes. We have the minutes of February 24th, 2025. And we need to have a discussion about those minutes. Do we have any motions about those minutes?
Is there an error found in those minutes?
Not in the February 24th one. I found an error in the March one, but not in the.
I got a comment on the, I think it's the February one, but actually 2 points. One, not that they would change anything, but there's a couple of references where a board member asked a question. That question was noted in the minutes, but the applicant's reply was not. Now again, I don't remember where it was, it's been so long ago. And it may become moot given how the rest of the discussion transpired. But if we're going to bother to record the question asked, I would think the answer should be there also.
Any response to that?
There's noted all these research into it.
Okay.
And my other comment, again, not to the point of changing, it might have been those same minutes or the following month, where in the minutes, a seated alternate was referred to as an alternate. And at that point in the discussion, there were a voting members. I'm not sure why there would be reference.
Let's deal with that minutes when we get to deal with those minutes. Right now, we're dealing with the February.
Now, again, I don't remember which of the two
Oh,
meetings.
okay.
And I said not to, I make these two comments not to change them, but just to bring them up as points.
Point taken. So I have a motion about the concerning the February 24th minutes.
I move that we approve the February 26th minutes.
Pete moves that we approve the minutes. Any second?
I'll second it.
Joe seconded it. All in favor of approving the February 24th minutes?
Aye.
And I learned that a recent thing, and even though I wasn't present, I've read the minutes, so I can vote yes. So, those minutes have been approved. Now, I have we look at the March 17th minutes, and my issue, Adam, is that I was present for this meeting, and yet in the minutes it says that Joe was seated for me.
That's strange.
And so it's on the seating, where it talks about the seating there. It says that, in those minutes, it says that.
No, I actually know what happened. He was seated for you because you weren't sworn in yet. So you were present for that meeting, but you weren't sworn in.
Okay, that makes sense. Yes, that makes sense, but it also, and it didn't say that I was absent, did it? So, that's good. All right, that clears all that up.
I'll double check.
That clears all that up. Yeah. Okay. Any motions concerning the March 17th minutes then?
I'll make the motion that we accept the minutes.
Second.
And seconded by Lisa. All in favor?
Aye.
Someone want to make a motion concerning regional impact for the various things that we're going to have today?
I'll make a motion that the two applications we have this evening do not rise to the level of regional impact.
Second.
And seconded by Lisa. Okay, so our public hearings tonight, I'll read them. ZBA 25-002.
Do we have to vote on that?
Oh, yes. All in favor of the motion? Say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. There is no regional impact. The first public hearing on the agenda is ZBA 25-002, special exception continued from 3/17/2025. Is this particular, are the parties involved in this one?
They have requested another continuance because they are still working on their traffic study.
Okay, so I'm reading the agenda here, and I will come back to this meeting. At that point, we'll decide whether or not to continue it or not. Okay? The second hearing is ZBA 25-005, a variance. Keith Perchek and Amanda Lewis have requested a variance pursuant to Section 8, Article C of the ordinance to allow construction in the Shoreline Protection District. The subject property is at tax map 247, lot 58. And then the next one is ZBA 25-006. Keith Perchik and Amanda Lewis have requested a special exception pursuant to Section 9 of the ordinance to allow development within the floodplain district. The subject property is at tax map 247, lot 58. And the final business on our docket is ZBA 25-007, special exception. David Moy has requested a special exception pursuant to Section 3-AA, Article B of the ordinance to construct a detached accessory dwelling unit at tax map 107, lot 18. Then we have other business, and then we adjourn. So let's go back to the first public hearing and the request for a continuance, for us to continue the public hearing.
Can I make a quick request? And this should have been noted on the agenda, so I apologize. Can we do Wayne's nomination first?
Certainly. Wayne Bucklider is an alternate. Has he taken the oath at Town Hall?
He's not able to until,
Not able to.
yeah. He's willing to.
He's wounded?
He's willing to.
He's willing
But
to.
you guys need to confirm him as an alternate prior to that.
But we have to confirm him.
Yeah. His term expired.
Do I have a motion to approve Wayne as an alternate on this board?
So moved.
By Pete Delaney, second. Second by Lisa Thorne. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you. Wayne, you're able to come to town hall whenever to do that oath.
Okay, I'll stop by tomorrow.
Okay. Now, tell us about the request from Black Belt.
So the representative for Black Belt, Mark Beaudry, has requested another continuance pending their traffic study. They do not have a time frame, but they are hopeful it will be soon. That is all the information I have. I do not have any updated plans, and I do not have any updated timelines, although they are pretty firm on having this traffic study by our next meeting.
Okay. And can I ask if they are also looking at whether or not they need another variance for?
They are. They're reevaluating the entire plan,
Okay.
and they will be coming in with any additional applications as they deem necessary,
Okay.
which we will
Time
confirm.
frame if they need to. Okay. So, do I have a motion to continue the public hearing? I mean, again, we're going beyond the stated time limit for our consideration of this.
Yep. So we have to open the public hearing before we can continue it.
Okay. We never closed it, though. We just continued.
We have to reopen it
I do.
before we can continue.
Okay. So then I will reopen the public hearing and entertain a motion to continue this, if anyone wishes to do so. Lisa moves to continue the motion, the application from black belt,
And Lisa, can you be specific on when you were continuing this?
until
Our next
our
round.
next
Okay.
regular meeting,
Thank you.
which, Adam, will be April,
We're
May,
May 19.
May 19th? Okay, is there a second?
Is there, do they tell you that they're gonna be continuing to delay it, or is this the only thing they need to have done?
For a zoning board, this is their only pending application.
Okay,
So they're requesting to continue their special exception. This has nothing to do with their planning board applications, which they are also continuing pending traffic study.
okay.
We need a second before we can, but right now, we have a motion on the floor. So, but we don't have a second for it. If there's no second, then we'll go back to your discussion of this, and that's what I think what Ann was doing there. She was discussing this without, before we had a
Sorry.
second. She doesn't have to second it. No, if nobody has seconded it, then we have to discuss it more.
I'll second it just so we can move forward.
Okay, so now, all in favor of continuing?
We have the
Discussion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
And it would be appropriate to ask where they are vis-a-vis the planning board?
They're the same. They're waiting for their traffic study. So the planning,
Traffic studies, the pending item in both cases?
yes, they have continued planning board hearing until May 8th. So they will be before the planning board on May 8th, regardless if they're ready or not.
And at what point can we say, hey, this has been going on for too long and we don't, at some point, can we not allow the continuation?
At any point you
We
guys
can allow
deem,
that tonight?
yeah, at any point you guys deem necessary.
And if we were to vote down a continuation of this public hearing, what are the implications for their application?
I believe you would hear it as it stands, and you could deny without prejudice, which means they could come back with the same application. That might be wrong, though.
That's the question I have, is
Yeah.
whether it's with or without prejudice. If they, because we're beyond the time limit, we have to act tonight. If we act tonight, whatever we do becomes, is that with or without prejudice?
If you feel like you don't have adequate information to approve the application, you deny it without prejudice, so they can come back with the same application.
And then we have to renotice and reopen the
Correct.
public hearing.
Correct.
So the big deal is we'd have to renotice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we, as a group, it seems to me we have more to lose than gain if we don't continue with it. I mean, all the paperwork's been done, nothing's going to change in the presentation, we're waiting on a traffic study. I see no reason why we shouldn't continue.
Other thoughts?
I just had a question. When you send notice, Amanda Gunsa,
Thank you, Amanda.
when you send notice, is that out of the town's pocket or is that the person on the permit application?
Applicant.
The applicant has to provide the payment for the postage, etc.
So then what is it that you lose if you deny it today? If anything, you would be gaining because he's got to pay to have the other application fee and it's his expense. So what is it to lose if you didn't deny it or if you didn't approve it? Because it,
I think that my sense of the board is that we probably would hear the application when it came in, whether it was afterward or not. In terms of procedure, it seems a little, since if we're denying it without prejudice, they can submit the application again. We would be listening to it anyway at some point. And it seems as though it's just extra back and forth. That's
but
what
it
people
almost
say.
seems like they don't have their ducks in a row, so it's almost wasting all of our time to come here for them to continue
And
to
that's a good
extend
point.
it.
That's a good point. You come here to participate in a public hearing, and if we're not gonna have a public hearing for you to participate in, then, you know.
I mean,
Can I say something back to them?
Can you say your name, sir, please?
Not good enough.
Matt Goodnow.
Okay, thank you.
It seems to me like this traffic study should have been forefront in their plan. You know what I'm saying? It's a major state highway. Why wasn't a traffic study done before all of this?
I can answer
I
that.
mean, this has been dragged on for a long time.
So a traffic study isn't a requirement for a site plan review or a special exception. So
Do you have an actual state approval for these entrances and exits and?
they have a conditional approval pending approval from zoning board and planning board. A traffic study is a requirement that the planning board and zoning board may seek, which they do typically, to their credit. They did ask for this up front. It's just not a requirement when they submit the application, so they just don't have to submit it. If they did so ahead of time, that would have been great, and it would have saved time.
Well, I get that, yeah.
Yep.
I was just wondering why it wasn't
Yep.
put out right off the bat.
Yeah.
You know
Yep.
what I mean?
Totally understand. Thank you for your concern. It's the planning board and zoning board required it at the first meeting. So they brought their application forward to both boards, and I believe it was planning board who required it, right?
I went to a few.
That one.
So to their credit, at the first public hearing, they both asked for it, which is really the earliest it can be caught if it wasn't presented in the application.
I just think it was like a site plan.
And we knew when we asked them to do this traffic study that it might take a while for them to get it together. They were optimistic that they could get it a certain deadline, and they missed that deadline, and this is the second deadline they missed from this one. And it's not unusual for traffic studies to take a while to get put together. So it's not, we want the traffic study.
I definitely understand that, but I just figured it would be kind of a, you want to put something here, the traffic, you know.
Be prepared.
And then their septic still hasn't been approved yet.
So with their, I'm sorry, please interrupt. With their, when they come back in to the zoning board and the planning board, they're gonna bring a new set of plans. And so those new sets of plans will have the new septic location, which then planning board will have to approve.
Okay.
Zoning board will look at it too. So, yeah, they're going to have a new location. We just haven't seen it yet.
Okay, I didn't understand.
All good, and you're welcome to come down to town hall too, to take a look when they do submit those. Happy to show you.
Unfortunately, a lot of these applications take a lot longer than we think they should take, because
Yes, for sure.
there are so many pieces and we're trying to get it right. And for that reason, I think that's why Pete suggested that we go ahead and approve the extension, simply because we want to have them have the full application, and then we make a decision on that full application.
I don't know if it was the applicant who stated it or Adam stated it, but they had gotten a couple of quotes for it, and they were trying to get it done as inexpensively as possible, which would lead me to say, if we were to allow this to be continued, to me that, that would be the last time. Because now it looks as though they're trying to save money rather than having a comprehensive traffic study. The traffic study doesn't take 3 months. So, I support the continuance, but that would be it. I would not support anything beyond that. Other thoughts?
And when you can speak to this,
Is that a motion?
well, we're talking about the motion.
Okay.
And so Joe is saying he's in support of Pete's motion.
I support what Joe said.
Okay.
At this point in time, we have no second on the
Right, we
motion.
still have to have a second on the motion, unless we take Joe's comments to be a second.
Not in this second.
Yeah, Joe did second the
In
motion.
this second, we made a comment.
That's right.
That allowed us to discuss it.
Right. So now, if there are no other comments, we can proceed to vote on this motion. Okay? Those in favor of continuing the
Well,
vote?
again, I would, and I don't know, Adam, what the process is, but I would amend the motion to state that that would be the last continuance.
We can amend the motion.
Well, I suggested that I make a friendly amendment to make that the last extension or continue.
Do you accept that? You have to accept it from the amendment. I accept it, okay. I will just say that it's quite possible that we find some other things that are objective.
And my motion is to, this would be the last extension regarding the traffic study.
Okay, that's more specific.
Can I have a second to that?
You'd say.
Oh, got it.
He accepted the friendly amendment, which is good enough.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
So those in favor of the amended motion made by Pete and seconded by Joe and made it, say yes. Aye.
No,
Aye.
All right. We have approved the extension. Now, Adam, we move to the variance request from Keith and Amanda for the construction in the shoreline protection district. You want to give us a background on that? Thank you for coming.
Thank you guys. See you guys.
So Keith Kirchak and Amanda Lewis requested a variance to build within the Shoreline Protection District. It's in map 247, lot 58. It's right next to Swanzey Lake. It is within that Shoreline Protection District, and it's just a small addition. And the applicant can tell you more about the specifics of why they need the addition. But staff fully supports this addition, and we don't think it's going to cause much harm to the overall site layout. The only note that we have is that the septic would need to support the additional bedrooms, and so that would be a question for the applicant. Conservation Commission did have some comments I wanted to pass along. The Conservation Commission has no issues with the project, but they recommend that the homeowner install an infiltration trench, dry well, rain garden, or something similar. And that is all the comments that I have. So if you guys want to come take my seat up here, you can talk a bit about your project.
We'd like to hear from the applicants.
Hello. I'm his daughter. He's the owner.
Why does she keep costing me money on it?
Hey, I did this. And I'm the writer, I'm the author of the application as well.
You're Amanda.
I'm Amanda, yes, Amanda Lewis.
So what can you tell us about this that may not be in the application that it was pretty thorough what you wrote?
Yeah, what's not in the application? I don't know, Dad.
It's our desire to live out our lives, if possible, on Swanzey Lake and in the house. Next month, my wife and I are both turning 78. Three of our parents lived to be 92, so that could be a long time for us to be in the house. But the house is configured in such a way as we have bedroom upstairs, we have laundry upstairs. You have to get to the attic for some reason, and you have to go upstairs for that. So we thought, well, let's see if we can build an addition onto the house that fits everyone's rules and so forth, and be able to have a place where we can live and take care of all of those items on the same, actually in the same room. You put the laundry in the room, storage.
And a handicapped accessible bathroom would be on that first floor.
Yeah, we're at the point that both of us have a cane, so moving rather slowly.
In the interest of aging in place and anticipating possible future physical mobility impairments. It's possible, because it has almost been possible, that he might be in a wheelchair at some point in time. So we wanted to get the handicap accessible bathroom and the first floor bedroom. The idea for me, my sister, my dad walking up the stairs every night to go to bed is terrifying for us, to be perfectly honest.
It takes time.
So yeah, but he's had a couple near misses, so a little too personal. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that in front of a board, but
We'll talk about
it's
it.
my first board meeting for zoning ever. So yeah, we'd like to see them on the first floor. Safety, if there was ever an emergency, like fire alarms going off, I don't like the idea of my parents rushing down the stairs. And we've been trying to figure out the best way to configure a first floor handicap accessible area where they can stay at their house on the lake, where they go out and look at the lake every day on their porch every night. They watch the boats go by and they want to stay there. And we were trying to figure out how to get them to be able to stay there. And this seems like the best option. We looked at different locations. We tried to keep it as modest as possible, so we weren't asking for too much. We're just asking for this bedroom. And we looked at the location off the back of the house, but it's all of the utilities are there, everything, including the pipe for the septic. If you built off of the side where we're proposing, you hit absolutely no utilities at all. So it would be
And it's on an impervious.
and it's on the existing impervious driveway.
So there's no basement,
There's no basement.
Okay, we start.
They would have to, they'd have to build the foundation,
Yes.
but
Is the addition any closer to the water than the existing property?
no. The existing property,
Or the existing-
it's like a rectangle that I think it's 50 feet from the shoreline. And then we'd be building, so it's like that, and there's the lake. Sorry, this is not very professional looking, but this is the house, and then the addition would be built right here.
We have a plan in here.
And the one thing we had to accommodate for is the front door is right where we would build the addition. So we just needed to add a little bit of space to the bedroom, to the addition, to allow for walking out the front door to the ramp that goes out to the backside where they access their car.
Now, I would also assume that you have to get state approval.
I will look for guidance on that. This is my first time in New Hampshire getting permitting for an addition or structure, but it's not within any kind of permitting zone for the state. It would be 75 feet from the water's edge.
Okay, but you are in
And it's 50 feet. Sorry?
You're in the 150-foot shoreline district.
Right.
Yes, for
150 the
Swanzey,
woodland
right?
district, Woodland setback.
250 for
250, yeah.
So the woodland, yes, we would have to apply.
So, my understanding is you need to apply for a shoreline permit as well as getting permission from the zoning board. Now, I say this out of personal experience.
Okay.
I live on Wilson Pond, and I'm in a house that's too close to the water, on too small a lot. And in order to make the addition on the house, we had to get a shoreline permit and the variance from the zoning board to do that. So that's, I think it's very similar to that particular situation.
Okay.
And so Adam and I are still researching the current business, but I had to satisfy, I'm sharing this with you because I think it's the same sort of situation. I had to share with the zoning board the fact that in addition to the extra square footage, although it was the second story, so it was mostly built on top, it didn't meet the requirements of the zoning because it increased the cubic feet of the house as well as the footprint, the square feet. So when you're not only increasing the footprint, the square feet, but you're increasing the cubic feet as well. And then you are building an area which is, any addition to that is a non-conforming lot, so you have to have all the requirements met, like the shoreline protection zone and everything. So there's certain things that we would want to know, and I think the board can ask some of those questions, things like, will this create, because you're going to create more impervious surface when water comes down on the roof and stuff and so on. What will happen to that water? And that's why the Conservation Commission suggested
Yes.
you put a drainage system around the building. Again, something I did when I built my particular structure. So I would encourage you to think about that as well. Anybody else want to add some comments before I monopolize the whole thing here?
So, the way I understand it, the front edge of the house is 45 feet away from the edge of the water. Okay, and the 125 number, shoreline protection, goes right through the center of your house, or does it miss it on the backside?
On the backside.
It's on the backside.
So your whole structure is within the
Oh, yes,
It is.
yes.
Yeah, well, I can echo, because we went through this also on Swanzey Lake, with the renovation at our house. And we had to do first with shoreline protection. That was, we had to have that before we could even proceed. And I agree that I think that's your first step. And you need to have that, because you're dealing with that overlay, and it doesn't go away. And even if you put an addition on the backside of the house, which is why I asked the question, you still would be unfortunately within that overlay.
So
What I'll tell you is that the shoreline people told me that their main concern is that the structure of the house not get any closer to the water, which in this case it doesn't.
Right.
What you got. So that's a good thing. But that you're going to have to convince them that this is legitimate development within their protected zone. And that means in order for us to give a special exception or a variance for this, we have to make sure that we're not violating the shoreline protection.
okay.
They will trump us, in other words. If the state says
I
you can't
understand.
build it, then no matter what we say, it won't happen.
Okay, I thought I had understood in reading the State Shoreline Protection Act regulations that it was a 50 feet buffer for the actual.
For the naturally vegetative buffer,
Not that
yeah.
piece of it. The shoreline protection went to 50 feet for structures. And then if it were, and also, I mean, this is just, I'm sorry,
You could be right. I mean,
this
but
is just what
why
I
think
did the
state people
research.
need to get involved because
Yeah, no, I appreciate this greatly. I'm just,
yeah.
the way that, from what my research, what I found was that this was outside of the jurisdiction of State Shoreline Protection Act.
I'm going to ask someone who knows a little bit more about the shoreline protection. Act.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Barbara Kelly.
Do we
So-
open this public hearing?
And it's not out of the
I think we
woodland,
did,
I
that's what-
understand it's not outside of the woodland
I did.
vegetative buffer.
I opened it. I didn't say we opened a public hearing, but I said let's move to this particular topic and we invited.
Is this mine?
Just for clarification,
No, I have not.
is holding the public portion of the hearing?
Yes. We're not in we're open the public portion, that's what Barbara can speak. And we haven't closed the public hearing when only the board discusses. So we haven't done that yet. Okay, Barbara?
So the state shoreline protection zone is 250 feet. So within that, there's different zones.
Yes, okay, that's
And
all.
the 50-foot buffer is, as stated, the natural buffer. And that's where you have to be sure you're not cutting down trees, and you have to maintain a certain amount of vegetation, and you can't build in that 50 feet. But then the next 150 feet is the woodland buffer, and that has restrictions in terms of the amount of impervious surface. And that's where you still need, so anything within that 250-foot zone, you need to file for a state permit. And they will determine whether or not you need to do any additional measures because of the amount of impervious surface that you are creating when you put that structure in.
In my
Okay,
memory-
and also,
Yeah.
yeah, so we're actually building on the existing impervious
Yeah, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
You have to.
I might have misinterpreted that piece then.
No, I mean, you have to file for a permit. Doesn't matter if.
Okay.
But when you say that, when you file for your permit, you will say, this is how much impervious surface we have, and this is how much we're gonna have when we're over. And they'll see that you're not changing the amount of impervious surface. But there's a certain amount that has to be left as natural woodland, and so there's another component to that. And then again, if the impervious surface, I mean, great, maybe it already is beyond the amount that for the square footage of the property, so you might have to do just some additional measures to satisfy the requirements of the state in order to do that, you know, even though your impervious surface might not have changed, or, you know, well, actually, it's usually the change, but you still have to file a permit because you're building within the zone, and you have to get a permit to be able to do that.
And I believe that's correct. In my case, I think it was like, I couldn't increase more than 25% of the impervious surface. That was the law. I couldn't go beyond that.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to read through it again, because when I read through it, because we're building on the driveway and there's very limited number of trees, I understand completely. I work for the state also. I understand completely that you would, I just misinterpreted thinking that I did not need to apply for a permit because we were outside of the 50 feet. So we're building a structure on impervious surface. And so, understood.
My suggestion is to call them.
Oh, I will, yeah. I can definitely take care of this.
I think they have a little thing you can do, you fill in, you know.
There's a worksheet.
Questionnaire.
There's a worksheet.
See, I thought I did that, and I thought we fell outside of everything. But I'm hearing you sound like you know more than me about this topic, so I'll definitely look into it. So, and I'll do it tomorrow. So.
Okay. Just a recommendation, and it's, I say this not loosely, but given my, 12 plus years on the land use board, I have found that the best way of going through this process is getting an engineering firm to help you. It's not cheap, I understand it, but it makes the process a lot less painful.
I'm a permitting specialist for my state, so I feel like I actually do project management for the state of Massachusetts. I didn't have, I don't have all the time in the world to work on this, but I'm trying and I'm taking each step at a time. So, and we're trying to spend as little money as possible on getting this addition built so that we can see it through. So I appreciate your advice. I am working on this on my own, and I'll probably continue to do so.
Going on what Joe said, we employed a landscape architect to design the landscaping water retention system, and that was helpful.
Yeah, and we do have a close friend of the family who's a landscape architect. So, and I work with landscape architects every day. So I have the ability to tap into those resources. But again, we'd rather not pay a firm to do this for us.
Barbara?
So when the ZBA approves or denies, when you approve, can you put conditions on? So could you say, say on the condition of state permits and on the condition, if you agree with the recommendations of the Concom, can you put those in as part of the conditions?
We can. And I believe, I just want to double check with Adam, that we can proceed. Adam? We could proceed even if they don't have a shoreline permit. We could say that this approval would be in condition that they would obtain a shoreline permit, that they do something with the recommendations of the Concom.
Yes, any conditions you want, as many conditions as you want.
So it's not like we have to go home now.
Okay, and if I may, what we're doing here is a multi-step process where we wanted to first see if this was at all possible.
Right.
And so we're starting with the Swanzey Zoning Board of Adjustment, Zoning Board of Adjustment. Then we were going to take the next step. So, we're paying for the permit for this, and if this didn't go through, then that's it. And then, so we're taking this incrementally, and that's why, I may not seem fully knowledgeable of the state permitting, but I'll get there and apply for that if I have to apply for that.
And it could be that you're going to come back to us or to the planning people and say, The zoning board was wrong. We don't need this permit, but I think we do.
And that's, yeah, that's your job. So.
That's fine.
So, other comment from the public, from the board? Yes,
Bruce Bergstrom, I'm on Butter 99 West Shore, we're fine.
okay. It's nice to hear that the abutters are fine.
Yes.
Excellent. Any other comments or questions from the board?
I think I'm on the right one. This is 25-005, right?
Yes.
And so in the description, it talked about the addition of the breezeway, which fixes the problem with the front door. And then it mentions the handicap accessible bedroom and bathroom measuring 26 by 20 feet. And then it talks about a second floor second floor of open living space is considered for the purposes of the application. The height will not exceed 45 feet. So that would be a second floor above that, and it would be open? Or, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, like a rec room for grandkids and stuff like that.
Like a big room,
Like a big room.
but not a bedroom.
Not a bedroom.
Just a,
No. And yeah, not a bedroom.
What is the impervious coverage today?
Parking lot.
Excuse me?
Parking lot and driveway.
No, of the entire lot, what is the percent of impervious coverage and what is it going to?
It's not,
Change.
there's no net change in impervious surface with the addition.
But you'll have to calculate that percentage.
We will.
Impervious to non-impervious for the shoreline people.
Yeah, I think unless I had to get to that point with this,
Also, I'm sorry,
no, it's okay.
we need to validate that it's meeting the requirements of the town, which has got a percent impervious coverage requirement also.
They're meeting the requirements.
And is that it stated in the package? That's what, I didn't see it in the package, which is why I asked the question.
They're meeting the ordinance requirements, and if they weren't required and stated, they didn't state it.
If you look at the lot, there's a lot, the lot also extends on the other side of Worcester Drive, so.
I understand that it's likely that it needed, I prefer seeing it documented somewhere. Which is, again, due to the lack of the documentation, and I'm not being critical, is why I
That's
asked the
okay.
question.
So what are you asking for? What are,
The town requires that no more than X percent of the total property be impervious. And I was just asking, what is that percentage today, and what will that percentage become?
Okay.
I'm fairly certain on this. That is not a thing in that district.
It's not.
It's not.
So is the recommendation, just so I understand, because I've been reading of a lot about the rain, the concept of the rain garden is to replace impervious surface, as I understand it?
It's to trap the water that comes off the roof, for instance, of the thing.
So it doesn't get into the lake.
Right, so it doesn't get into the lake, and that would be, one of these conditions, I think we could state that, because at the end of the day, protecting the lake is what the town wants to do.
Right.
I love the idea of a rain garden. Sounds nice.
There's no impervious.
Not in this district and not in
That's the rural agricultural.
Yeah, that's more of a commercial district.
I've seen it in 9 commercial districts in other towns.
In other towns, yeah, maybe.
It usually isn't in this district because the lot sizes have to be supposedly so large anyway.
Again,
Nobody
I'm just, based on my past experience, it was required, which is why I asked the question.
Joe? Question. The state will ask for that. That's where it falls.
And that's certainly on Swanzey Lake. Okay. Any other public comment? Now we'll close the public hearing. Now, board members, do you have questions? talk about? Any other comments?
I know you closed the meeting, so I'll just ask the question. But
Yeah,
did
please.
we talk about what's special about this particular law? Is that the variance? That's on the next one?
Well, this is a variance, isn't it?
Okay, I didn't want to get ahead of myself.
Suspension exemption.
There's two.
This is the variance, which is the more difficult one to get.
Right. And I
We have a standard for the special
So
exception,
it is a question.
the next one.
I think,
they're on the next one.
I think,
We
what we
have
do,
the special exception.
you know,
We
that
have
was,
two.
they provided
They provided.
that here, so,
Okay,
um,
all right.
special condition of the property. Plaza setback, and they're requesting variance to construct it. So in other words, they're in a tight space
Yes.
because of the setbacks, and they need to, that makes it a special condition. So I'm not actually proceeding to the questions that I'm asking if other people have, discussion on what you talk about.
I guess are we building a single story or a two-story?
I think the application says it's an application for both.
And the second story is just a great room, whatever.
Yeah.
Right, great room.
That's the
right.
concept that they're looking at there.
We're looking at an addition of a 662 square foot structure, footprint wise.
And then volume wise as well.
It's double that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a consideration because I think we have to, we're asking for a variance from the volume and as well as the square footage. Yeah.
What is the, I have to ask, what is the town of Swansea's stand on volume versus square footage? Is it, am I right in assuming that it had something to do with whether or not the residence was year-round? Do you remember that? When this first came up, I mean, you could get a special exception and or the variance if in fact it was a year-round home. But if it was a seasonal home, you couldn't get it. That to me is the way it all happened years ago, and I'm just trying to catch up, that's all.
I don't remember that being part of the discussion on my case. I will say that
Yeah, it was a town.
the volume was a sticky point in my application.
So, can you hear them?
I'll say that.
Yeah.
They're talking about
No,
that would
nobody remembers that, just me.
be a two-story.
The only thing that comes to mind, Pete, is the accessory dwelling. There's a square footage limitation there, right? Isn't it 1,000 square feet?
Yeah,
And
that's
shed.
I'm talking
That's-
about a long time ago.
So if this were an accessory dwelling, then it wouldn't, two stories wouldn't make it because it's got more square feet? No, it's got.
Right.
The footprint's
Yeah.
within 1,000 square feet, but with the added two
Yeah,
stories.
It wouldn't be allowed.
Just another, I think it's great that the applicant has sort of bought into the recommendation from the Conservation Commission to put in place some sort of retention area, whether it's a rain garden or whatever. I think that's great. And conceptually, sort of at a conceptual level, I support what's being asked for, but gee, I'd like to see, and not an engineer drawn site plan. I'd like to see a site plan that includes all of this.
But we're not approving the site plan, we're approving the use, but you're right. It would be nice.
But this, what we approve, and if we approve the variance, then has to go before the code enforcement officer. And if that approval doesn't include, let's say, a rain garden, what catches the fact that that is a requirement?
We would have to set that requirement.
So that would-
I'd rather set it by a drawing that is what we approve, rather than approve it conceptually. I like to see it run out.
I'm not sure that's
They're meeting the requirements of the application, it can be a condition of approval.
Agreed, it could be.
Yeah.
So what I'm telling you is my own mind. I'd like to see it in black and white before I approve something.
It can be a condition of approval.
But we can say that but I know what you're saying, Joe. You'd like to see more specifics about this particular condition. And what Adam is saying is that could be something the planning board would take up if they.
This doesn't go before planning.
Well, yeah.
Could be a condition of your approval as a zoning board where we cannot make.
I've just seen over my years too many times where you put a condition that gets lost as the thing progresses.
They're meeting the application requirements.
So I'd like to see it, what I'm approving to be the thing.
Understood.
Maybe I just been burned too many times. And I'm not suggesting these folks are gonna do that. It's just a lot cleaner if it's all done upfront.
Comments from anyone else?
Thank you. I agree with what Joe's saying. However, given the stage that we're at now, I think we should have a list of conditions to, because we've already talked about state permitting so that they meet the state requirements. And if the state asks for a rain garden or other structural item, that it be adhered to.
Can I ask a question of Adam? Adam, what if we were to say that we require them to have a water retention or mitigation plan that has to be approved by the Conservation Commission?
I don't believe you can.
It's sticky.
It has to be a regulation.
It's sticky because it's not part of the variance criteria. And so if they're meeting the variance criteria, you legally have to approve the variance. You can attach conditions that they a condition could be that they look at Concom's recommendations and think about implementing them. But having it be a requirement is.
We can't put in a requirement that they meet state requirements?
No, you can't. That is one that
Do
you
that.
really need to make.
We cannot make a requirement that they do something with the water retention?
It's not a requirement for the variance.
Okay.
If it's not a variance requirement, it's really tough to justify that.
Why isn't it a condition if whether or not we vote on giving the variance depends on whether we're satisfied that such a thing will happen? In other words, when we go through the questions, it may very well be that the spirit of the ordinance is met because of the water retention.
If you can argue that it directly relates to one of these criteria, then it's probably legally fine. But at this point in time, we can't discern that. I think once we read through these questions.
Okay. So it'd be something, if it came up during one of the questions, that we would approve, that we would say yes to one of these questions, or if such and such were true.
I think that would be okay. Again, you're kind of getting into sticky territory.
Yes, we're getting very into.
But sticky's fine as long as you make it a condition. Denying it because of that would be difficult, but a condition of approval would be acceptable, likely.
Okay. Are we ready to move to the questions, folks? Or are there more comments and thoughts? Hearing no objections, we'll go to our questions. The first question is, could the variance be granted without being contrary to the public interest?
Oh, I know that.
And I'll start with Andy.
Yes, I think the variance could be granted without being contrary to the public interest. The public interest is protecting the water quality in Swanzey Lake. So at minimum, can we add conditions now, or do we add them later?
What you're saying is, you would grant, you would say it's not contrary to public interest because such and such is going to happen.
Well, so, all right, the variance could be granted without being contrary to public interest if the state's protection, water protection is being adhered to.
Would that mean if they get the shoreline?
They have to have the shoreline permit and meeting state recommendations.
Lisa?
Yes, and I was going to say exactly what answer. As long as they get the shoreline.
Okay. Pete?
I'm just wondering if we need to add that condition and arguing not wanting to put that as a condition, an overall condition.
Well, if it's in number one, then it would have to be an overall one, because all of these have to be met.
Yes, I understand. In fact,
Yep, so I just added that to the conditions. And I'll review them when you're ready.
okay. No, I think as long as we,
into the exact same place.
we're comfortable with that. So I'm
Into the lake.
in favor. I think it does meet.
Joe?
I agree, but maybe go a step further, that, to satisfy the spirit of the zoning ordinance, you would also want to mitigate the runoff.
That's our second question. This is the first question, which is whether this is contrary to public interest or not.
The ordinance is written to protect the public interest, so I had a tough time separating one and two.
Can I say something?
Yes or no on number one?
Raise your hand.
Yes.
And I'm also a yes on this one. I think that the fact that this is a non-conforming property on Swanzey Lake means that there are limitations on what can be, the public interest is to have this as a viable property, and I happen to think that the applicants are asking for this for a good reason, that meets the requirements of the town's interest. Okay. Question 2. Would the spirit of the ordinance be observed if the variance were granted? Lisa?
I'm going to say yes, as long as they're getting that shoreline.
Okay. Pete?
I believe it. I would say yes also.
For the same reason?
Same reason.
Joe?
Yeah, as I said before, I'd say yes with the caveat that it includes some water runoff mitigation.
In other words,
do that
you'd say yes if it includes.
We were going to install that anyway.
Mitigation.
Water runoff mitigation.
Okay, and I will agree with Joe as well. Both the shoreline permit and including water runoff mitigation is important to make sure it obeys the spirit of the ordinance. And
I will agree. If those conditions are met, then we're observing the ordinance.
the spirit of the ordinance.
The spirit of the ordinance.
Number 3, would granting the variance do substantial justice? What do you think, Pete?
Well, it's substantial justice to the owner at this point in time. Are we creating something that we'll have to review when other folks come forward with the same ideas? This one I always had trouble with. I think it does substantial justice because I think it allows them to develop the property with minimum impact as long as they meet the first 2 conditions. So I would say yes.
Okay, Joe?
Well, again, if you look at it the opposite way, if you didn't grant it, would it be an injustice? And I think in this case it would be an injustice. So therefore, I would vote yes on that.
Okay. And?
Yes, I'm justice to both the town, which has an interest in protecting the environment, and to the family that gets to enjoy their property to a greater
Agree. Lisa?
Also, yes, it's very reasonable use.
Okay, and I agree, yes. I also think that there is something about justice for a family that's been living in Swansea as long as they have, to be able to live on their property without doing harm to the region, the area, the lot. These lots on the edges of our ponds are too tiny. They're crammed together, but they are important places for people to live, and as long as people are taking care of them and making sure they're not being abusive to the water, I think that's a good thing to have. Justice. Could the variance be granted without diminishing surrounding property values? Joe?
Well, there's no evidence that would diminish. And we've got at least one piece of information from the butter, so I don't see it diminishing property value.
Okay. And?
For the same reasons as Joe stated, and we have, the butter said they don't have any issues with it.
Okay.
Yes, for the same reasons.
Pete?
No, I think it makes sense, and I think it would increase the property values.
And I will point out that in their application, they stated that neighboring property increased its value a great deal when their house increased its value a great deal when the neighboring property was improved. I think that's a telling point. Okay, question 5. Do special conditions of the property exist that distinguish it from other properties in the area?
I answered all
Start
these
back again
questions
here.
directly.
Yes, I do think in that area, and granted, a lot of the properties that are on the lake are quite cramped. However, I think that distinguishes it from other places. So they have a very confined area in which they can build. And I've seen a great deal of thought put into this application where they're not encroaching further on the water, and I find it very thoughtful, so.
Lisa?
Yes, for all of the same reasons.
I have trouble with the unnecessary hardship part of it, you know that.
But it's not. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
No, this is just special conditions of the property exist that distinguish it from other properties.
I agree.
Joe?
I've got a question, David. What does the term area mean?
I would say in this case, Swanzey Lake.
If I use that as the point of comparison, I don't know that it's unique. If it's a broader town, then it is very big. So that's why I asked for that clarification. If that's what it's being compared to, it's virtually all like that. So I don't think it's unique.
So that's a no.
I guess so, unfortunately.
I struggle with this one too for the same reason. It's like a lot of the other property area, in the area where they're in the Swanzey Lake area. Although there are some other properties in the area that like, Philip Pines and other places that are not at all like these. And so in some senses, it's like other residences around Swanzey Lake, but not some of the other things around Swanzey Lake. And so I will say that it's different from the non-residential places. And the residential places on Swanzey Lake will all going to have the same problems in terms of any kind of additions or other development there. So, owing to these special conditions of the property that distinguish it from the property in the area, there is not a fair and substantial relationship between the general public purpose of the ordinance and the specific application of the provision to the property. Now, this is one of our complicated ones that deal with it here. You have to agree or not agree with this statement. There is not a fair and substantial relationship between the general public purpose of the ordinance and the specific application of the provision to this property. Lisa?
Needs. I agree.
Agree with the state.
I agree. For the reasons that we have in number 5.
Because of the special conditions of the
Special
property.
conditions of the property.
Right, which is what you're asked to say.
Yes, special conditions of the property.
This one was hard
The
to
special conditions of the property, I
give you
agree.
guidance doc.
I struggle with no fair and substantial relationship between the party and what distinguishes it.
Joe, understand?
I agree.
Yeah, I agree, but less because of the property and more because of the individual situation. And I don't know if those words allow me to conclude that, but that's to me what makes this compelling.
Ann?
Yes. No, I see it as sort of, at least in my mind, I look at kind of Wilson, any place where there's a, you just can't build in a place. So when you get anybody, the people who about Yale Forest, the people who about the airport, the people who about Wilson Pond, the people who about Swanzey Lake, those are unique properties. You really can't get any further. You can't do anything. So yes, I'm a yes.
I think the general public purpose of the ordinance is to protect the shoreline. We're talking about the Shoreline Protection District here.
Yes.
And the specific application of this provision to the property, the property, if this provision prevents the addition they're proposing, it's not going to affect, putting the addition on the property is not necessarily going to affect the health of the shoreline. It's not going to hurt the health of the shoreline. So there's where I don't see there's a fair and substantial relationship between the two of them. I think that adding the addition to the house is not going to harm the wetland, given those things that we agree should be part of our approval. So I don't see the fair and substantial relationship. If this were going to cause a problem for the wetland, then there would be a fair and substantial relationship between what they're trying to do and the purpose of the ordinance. So I will agree with this statement. And is the proposed use a reasonable one? And we'll start with Joe.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Pete?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes. It is reasonable to want to stay in your home.
Yes.
And making accommodations in order to support that need to happen.
And I will say also that, expound on it a little bit more, just to say that when people reach a certain age, we should try, when we can, to let them stay in their home that they've grown to love and want to be part of, and we want them to be part of our community, to continue to be part of our community. So I think that's important. Now, since we've said that AI and AII, we've answered the affirmative to those, we do not have to go to B here, which means that we are now ready to entertain a motion to approve or not approve this particular application for variance.
Before we do that, another question, and not officially, but in our discussion, we sort of put two conditions on it. One is state approval, to
Shoreline protection.
in the shoreline protection, the other is the runoff mitigation. does the state approval on the shoreline protection also encompass the approval of the septic system, given that they're increasing a bedroom?
I believe you said it was supported for?
I don't believe that is true.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
What part of my statement isn't true?
I'm not sure that the additional bedroom means more people are living in the house.
Septic systems are sized per bedroom, so they're adding a bedroom.
But I think that we were told that the septic system was adequate. I think. So
I would be approving the septic system.
Excuse me?
I would be the one approving the septic system, so that's something I will look at later.
Okay. Where I'm heading is, should that be another condition that it requires town
They're going to need a
approval
building permit.
and/or state approval?
They're going to need a building permit by the law.
Jay's correct.
Okay, so I'll repeat that. Maybe I sound like an asshole, though. Do we need to add a condition that it's subject to septic system approval, either by the town or the state?
No, because if, as I understand it, if they can't get a building permit, they're going to have to redo their septic system. So they have to get the building permit from the town. We don't have to specify that condition, because that condition is already there. So we don't have to make that a condition.
And that's true of the state also. Because the state approves septic system.
I think so.
Yeah?
So should that be a third condition, that it gets state approval, not only to construct in the shoreline protection area, but also that the state approves the septic system?
I think our town planners are saying that that's not necessary.
Surprised to hear that, but okay.
Because in order for them to build, there's still have to be a building permit, and that must satisfy those conditions. Okay? So, is somebody ready to craft the motion?
I think what I want to do is, could we, and I want to, because I want to respect what Joe has to say, and our conditions, is can we write down what the conditions actually are that we're stating?
Yes. So I think we want to actually formulate the language here, right? So I was asking if someone was ready to formulate that language.
I'll assist with the conditions.
Okay, so I will make the motion that we accept ZBA 25-004 variance for Keith, Pacheco, and Fernando Lewis.
So it's not
Based, provided we have the conditions that Adam's piece.
And just to reread those conditions as they stand, condition of approval, the first condition, the state's shoreline permit must be approved prior to occupancy. I think
Maybe prior to building permit.
prior to building permit, okay.
Yeah, that's the first thing you need to get.
And then the second condition, as it was stated, was include runoff mitigation, although I would like some better language on that. So, if anybody has better language on that.
You would have to do that anyway.
Stormwater management
Is not an issue.
System, stormwater management system,
Surface water.
surface water,
Mitigation,
surface water mitigation.
stormwater.
Stormwater mitigation.
Okay.
So,
We have to do,
stormwater mitigation.
by the plan.
Yes, stormwater mitigation.
You just have to do the building.
And that's a condition of our approval, that's what that, could you read this back to
What
what
standard?
to what standard exactly? To the satisfaction of the building inspector?
You would have to.
So that's the only thing.
That's the sticking point, is state standard, our standard, I believe, more rigorous than, but at minimum has to meet state standards.
So I'm going to
So, Adam, can you read back to us what the motion now is?
So the first, so the motion would be, Karazinski makes a motion to approve the variance with the following conditions. First condition is that all relevant state permits must be approved prior to building permits. and a stormwater mitigation plan must be implemented prior to building permit.
When you say it must be approved, or?
Must be
Yeah, implemented isn't right.
implemented, not the right word.
No, that's an action.
Must be submitted?
Submitted.
No, you want
You
to,
want it approved?
It has to be approved.
I think so, approved by the town building inspector,
Approved by code enforcement
by
officer.
code enforcement officer, okay?
And those are the two conditions.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Pete seconds it. Discussion? Joe's happy.
Yeah.
Stefan?
I should add, this is withdrawal for you, Joe. That first condition, that would cover septic, because the state requires a septic design. Doesn't necessarily have to be constructed, but they need the design. And then I approve that, and then.
So when he's changed that to all state permits, that can cover what you need. Okay?
Which is why I asked the question.
Good job. We get there in the end. Are we ready to vote, folks? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
I support it conceptually, but I much prefer seeing the design of the water retention before approving it.
So what
The
that,
engineering, you have to vote no.
okay? So it passes 4-1.
Well, it has to pass because
All the conditions were set,
Yeah.
but he can still record his foot as no because it passed.
I will say that it's not an application requirement, the board cannot require it.
Yeah.
I will say that again.
Yep. I don't think it matters as long as the board votes in the majority to pass it. Okay, so we have your variance.
Thank you.
Now let's look at the special exception. So, look for a special exception to build it in the floodplain district. Adam, you want to give us a little background on that, please?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. I mean, the plans are the same, the reasoning is the same, applicants are the same that you guys put in here. The floodplain district, in order to build within that district, we need a special exception. And that kind of, that's it. I mean, there's just that line in our code that says in order to build a structure, you need a special exception. Staff is supportive, and Conservation Commission has the same comments as the last application, so.
So I would also read from the zoning regulations, it says that all development is prohibited except by special exception from the Swanzey Zoning Board of Adjustment. So the only way you can build anything in the floodplain district is with approval from us with a special exception. And then it says, no special exception shall be granted in the floodplain district except under the following conditions. The proposed development is otherwise permitted in the underlying district. Okay? Or the applicant demonstrates that such development shall not result in any increase in flood levels during the occurrence of a 100-year flood. Or 3, the placement of mobile home parks is hereby prohibited. Or the zoning board of adjustment shall, upon approval of the special exception, notify the applicant in writing that a permit must also be obtained from the building inspector, and that the following regulations shall apply to the drainage as permanent around the top of the conditions of the building inspectors. So as far as our concern is, it seems to me that we need to look at questions 1 and 2. Is this a development that's otherwise permitted in the underlying district? And have they demonstrated that such development shall not result in any increase in flood levels during the occurrence of the 100-year flood? And I don't see any problem with any of those. Do you? Any of you? Barbara? No, I'm sorry, I will open the public hearing on this one.
okay. So often when you're talking floodplain, you're talking about storage of water. So if that space is no longer able to accommodate water, then there's also the issue of whether you can provide compensatory storage.
And the question there is, since they're building it on top of an impervious surface, are they changing any of that storage?
Well, you know, that If it's all totally on top of impervious, but they're also changing above the surface too, in terms of
Where
flood
water
storage. I mean,
flow.
how high, where is the flood zone? Where does it go? You
It
know?
goes, they're almost their entire property. We have a diagram in the packet here which is quite scary. If the flood happens, 100-year flood happens, all the houses on Swanzey Lake are going to be inundated.
So you're talking about if indeed the existing land is impervious and there's no storage underneath, there is storage above, depending on how high the flood is. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, if the water comes over and you've got, I forgot how big the structure is, I didn't look at that detail, but you've got how many cubic feet depending on how high the water is, that's gonna be moved elsewhere. Do you know what I mean?
I do, except that I think in this case it's going to sit inside the building.
Inside, or it depends on how it's built, you know?
Yeah.
I know, it just seems crazy to build
I
a
mean,
flood zone, but
Well, I guess what I'm
we
saying
can't
is,
do anything about it.
and maybe the members of the commission need to talk about this more, but I think that adding this 600 and something square feet of structure is not going to change the devastation of a 100-year flood. Looking at that map, the flood map that we were given back.
But you also have cumulative effect. I mean, if every property owner did that, would it further extend the flood zone? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I just was amazed by that packet, by the thing in the packet about the,
Amazed by the what?
I was amazed by the picture in the packet of where the floodwaters would be. It's more, we have it black and white, but on the computer, it's nice and blue. And it's quite something. I'm looking forward to it.
I have a question about the impervious surface, and I should have asked in the last one, but didn't seem as important, is you don't have paved driveway, right? It's just crushed rock, is that?
Yeah.
So it's not, it's taking in some water, you just,
It's heavily compacted, and within when I was looking at the regulations,
Right.
impervious surface includes gravel, packed driveway or
Okay.
surface.
so when it rains though, it's not running right down the driveway, right? Or
No, it is.
it is, okay.
Yeah, it's not going into the driveway. It's definitely, it's like a trail, you know,
Right,
it's rolling off of it.
right, okay. So when you add a roof, it's gonna go right down, and then, I think what you're saying is there might be more water in a confined space.
Right.
Yeah, and you would
So
have to
that's why-
mitigate that.
That's why.
That's what Bart
Mitigation,
was talking about.
yeah, that's where it comes into play.
Mhm. And there, I'll leave it at that.
So, I mean, it is your obligation to demonstrate that this will not result in any increase in flood. But
So,
it's not clear from this picture how deep the water is, but the fact that it's over West Swanzey, almost to West Swanzey, West Shore Road, just the entire footprint of the house is filled with water beyond, up almost to the road. So I think personally, I think Barbara makes a good point that this would cause water to move in different ways around the property, but I'm not sure that it significantly increases the damage that would be done by the flood. That's my personal opinion.
Big question for the applicant.
Yeah, go ahead.
What was the source of the floodplain data?
FEMA.
And again, I'm not questioning with you, it just surprises me because in July of '23, we had a 100-year event. And the issue wasn't the lake coming up, though it did come up probably about 2 feet. Came up nothing like this. The damage was from the runoff coming from other places. That's why I was just wondering the source of this. I look at this and that's not the issue with the 100-year event.
Right.
I think, you know, the event plays out differently with each storm event that you have. I think this is an estimated 100-year flood zone where there could possibly be an event that would bring the water up, but also the house is built up on the foundation. So, I mean, understood that your comment that it would move the water around, but the house, the damage would be mitigated even further because it's built up another 5 feet or 4 feet or so above ground too. So our house, their house stands like 4 feet above ground. Maybe he knows the answer.
So, the building, the bank said, you're in floodplain.
Yeah.
So I had a special flood insurance, super expensive. But, I hired a consultant that went and analyzed it and prepared a report for FEMA and for the bank that did analysis and said, we aren't in floodplain. It's like the lowest level. And they looked at the elevation of the house and they just, you know, I got a waiver because it really isn't. It says it is, but it's not really.
Because of the elevation of the house.
Yeah, I mean, yours would probably pass too, but it's, to Joe's point, it's not really a floodplain, it abuts body of water, and almost anything that abuts a body of water, they consider a floodplain, but then he did some analysis, he's gonna charge you, they all do, but then they submitted it to the bank, submitted it to FEMA, sent the FEMA report, it was fine. I think it's just
You never had to pay for your insurance.
Yeah, it's nice to hear. I'm not sure that's factual information.
take it for whatever.
Yeah.
Bank requires.
So, that July, 2 years ago, what happened to your property during that storm?
It just hit the bank. It was right below the dock. Or it was like, it was going over the dock.
It was over the dock.
But it didn't go.
The lake was over the dock.
The water
lake
was over the dock.
over the dock, but it didn't encroach on our property at all.
But it never came up on the property because the property sits above the dock.
So what we're talking about runoff also.
Runoff came down between our house and the only damage I had was maybe a 5-inch long crater.
Yeah.
And 5 inches deep, and that was it. We're pretty fortunate because our septic system sits across the road, and that is way up. If you look to the back of it and look down, all the water would have come like this around my property and then down between our two properties.
Never even got to your septic.
No.
No.
Close. Not to that, close to the house. The house is elevated as well compared to the.
Question, Barbara?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, if the house is elevated, then it lifts it out. I mean, isn't that just like proper building measures when you're in the flood zone? If it's not, if it's above, then the water would go below it to let out.
Well, it doesn't have piers. It's the foundation.
It's, the foundation.
But fortunately, the house originally was built where you have to walk upstairs to get into the front door. So there's no structure underneath, like maybe there's 4 feet between the ground and the first elements of the structure other than foundation.
Is it a solid slab or is it just a pier?
There's a foundation on the back part that was built.
There's a 4-foot foundation around the new one. They had to lift the old house up. The house was originally, where we live, is 2 pieces. If you want to talk about a 100-year flood, the house is at least 125 years old. Mr. Brown across the lake, in his ideas, what's going on, and how he grew up there, says 95 West Shore Road was the original building housing people on the lake. That's the front of our house. The second part of our house was built back in the
60s, 1960s, or 50s.
Wait a minute. Bruce worked on that. When you were, how old were you when you were working on the,
Over the bar?
Yeah.
14.
he was 14, so let's add 65 years to that. Oh, sorry. Anyway, we do sit up quite high.
Oh, he was asking about foundation. So
the
there's
foundation.
poured foundation in the back part. There's no foundation.
Yeah, there's a 4 foot, they had to raise the front end up and put a foundation on it and put it down.
So the outside edges of it are on a foundation. but
Exactly.
Underneath it is just space.
Right.
It's
Is
dirt.
there-
And it's just dirt.
Dirt.
Then the second part has a crawl space, which is enclosed cement and cinder blocks.
Okay. I think some of that is something that the building inspector has to look at in terms of the permitting process and so on, to satisfy the floodplain regulations. But if we provide a special exception, then that means the building inspector must give you a permit that satisfies these conditions. So we don't have to make sure you satisfy those conditions, we have to make sure that we've given the building inspector instructions to look into that permit for you. Comments? More comments from the public? The board?
How would any applicant demonstrate that a development would not result in an increase? How would any applicant anywhere in Swansea do that? So we're asking them to do it. So how do we, I mean, this is the first time I've been 5 years here, not had a case like this, so I'm just asking.
Right,
So
we've never had a case.
how would any reasonable person, any applicant demonstrate this at all? How could they do that? I mean, we're requiring something that we ourselves can't demonstrate. Am I right?
And she's asking.
I'm not necessarily, I need to read the language in the ordinance. And I'm going through it, because it all depends on how it's worded in the ordinance.
I think they have to demonstrate it, but who decides whether they demonstrate it or not? I think that's our job, is to decide whether they demonstrate it or not. How they might do that, they have to satisfy us and that would mean making an argument that they're not gonna increase shall not result in any increase in flood levels during the occurrence of the 100-year flood. So they would have to make an argument that we would accept. Barbara?
It sounds like this gentleman did that. You might have to engage an engineer to determine what the water volume would be. And, it sounds like you had somebody who did that for you.
Yeah, he just looked at elevation.
Yeah, well, looked at elevations, but, when engineers do stormwater management, that's what they're determining is how much flow there would be in a certain amount of flood, 100-year, 500,000-year flood. And then they calculate the volume of water and whether or not what they're doing will accommodate that. So I don't know if that's what that would involve, is getting an engineer to do an evaluation.
It might. I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm looking at the map provided by FEMA that you said which outlines the area, and it outlines the area of the proposed addition here in this map. And I'm looking at that as a very small square footage of the floodplain area, and I'm saying it doesn't look as though that's going to increase the flood by any great amount. But you're right, it occupies a space that the water would otherwise occupy. It's just a very small space. Come on.
So I believe that the point of the shoreline permit is so you guys don't have to figure that out, because whatever the requirements are of the permit is based upon what the state is asking for. Because
So we're looking at this in two different ordinances, the shoreline ordinance and the floodplain ordinance. But what you're saying is the shoreline permit looks at both. The shoreline permit looks at both floodplain, flooding and that. I wasn't aware of
No,
that.
they don't.
They have their own set of parameters.
So, here's how I want us to look at this, if possible, and I appreciate your question. I think we have to look at the application as submitted, and if that isn't addressed adequately for the board's requirement, I think we can make a condition of approval at that time.
Yeah,
Or-
we're not talking about making a condition, because I just don't see where anyone could. I mean,
Well-
based on the data we have so far,
Exactly.
we couldn't say that it would make it worse.
So the ordinance does leave it pretty
Vague.
open with how they need to represent that information.
Okay.
And I think the way they do this here is they show us the site plan.
Yep.
They say it's already on impervious surface. You guys look at the description of the project and the answers to all the questions. And you
Right.
make a determination if they satisfy that requirement,
Okay. well,
Based on what we've got.
based on what you got.
Okay.
And if you determine not, then that's your prerogative.
I'm good then, thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, so the elevation of their house is higher than the elevation of the dam. So for their house, it can flood because the rest of Swansea is going to be flooded before it can go right over the dam.
You're saying that the foundation of their house?
Yeah, it's higher, right, we need the elevation, so, it's higher than the dam. So we're no longer going to go, it's going to go over the dam and flood the rest of Swansea.
Unless it's not flowing over there fast enough. No, you're right. Yeah.
Can't.
Which is essentially what happened.
Right, which
with the
kind of
storm
happens.
event that recently
It
occurred.
almost breached the dam, and another hour later, Lake was empty mostly. So yeah, that's what the engineer said.
If that is indeed true, if the elevation of the house is higher than the dam, then that may answer the question. I don't know.
10 to 15 feet.
Well, from a practice standpoint, based on data from the applicant, data from the butter, and my own experience, because I live on the lake also, I don't believe that the house is in the floodplain. Our experience in July 2023, the lake did not flood in this way. I went to the bank 4 years ago for a mortgage that's no higher than this house, and I didn't require flood insurance. So what's been proposed, and I don't doubt where they got the data, I don't think it's real.
Okay.
And when you look at the construction of the lake, it's not real. So I don't think the lake would ever flood in this way.
Well,
And it didn't flood in that way.
we as board members can make our own decisions, or we can make our own judgments based on our personal experience. That's, but that's, we're looking at a map of what they think the flood is,
And I question the map.
It's not what they think, it's directly from FEMA. Our ordinance states where they need to get the data from. They pulled the data directly from FEMA's website.
Jay, can I ask a quick question? Question two, number two that you're talking about, if you look at the first paragraph and all of the things that an owner could do to the property, filling, grading, paving, excavation, don't you think that kind of relates to two? And these people aren't going to go in there and have a giant excavation project. It's going to be a small footprint. Do you think that number two is preventing somebody that's got a bigger project?
I think that's the intent.
Okay.
But remember what it says up in the opening paragraph, this includes but not limited to buildings. So, I think buildings is part of what they're designed to address, but I think you're right, that the intent of the ordinance is probably for a much larger, construction, but,
Joe and I were just discussing that, we have at least 4 property owners on the lake here in this room. And Joe and I just look at that FEMA map. I know that that's what's printed and that's what we have in front of us. But in our experience, I can't imagine the lake coming up high enough to bother that property. that flood, the whole hillside came down by our house, right in the lake, and then the feet right in front of us. But it didn't impact the property, didn't impact the house. So, I struggle with kind of like Joe does, with kind of setting conditions on information I'm not comfortable with, and I'm not comfortable with that FEMA floodplain based on my experience.
Well, what they, in terms of them demonstrating what they've demonstrated where this addition is going. And in your judgment, where the addition is going is not in the area of risk, is what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
And I would agree with that. Are we ready to move to the questions here, folks?
Yes.
First question. I'm closing the public hearing. First question is, the proposed use is similar to one or more of the uses already authorized in the district and is an appropriate location for such a use. Joe?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
I would agree. This is a residential use that is authorized in the district. Number two, such approval would not reduce the value of any property within the district or otherwise be injurious, obnoxious, or offensive to the neighborhood. Pete?
I agree.
Lisa?
Yes.
Ann?
I agree, I haven't seen any evidence that says it would.
Joe?
Yes.
I agree, and there's no evidence that this would be in any way a no. Three, there will be no nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians. Lisa?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Pete? Yes. And I will agree, there's no evidence that there would be any hazard to vehicles or pedestrians. Number four, adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operations of the proposed use. Ann?
Is that a condition, so?
Adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operations of the proposed use.
Part of the application, yes.
Okay, Joe?
Yes, but I struggle with the words yes.
Pete?
I don't struggle with the word yes.
Yes.
And I agree, I think the access to the property is maintained, so those are the four questions that we have. Let's look again. I think we also need to consider that this will not result in any increase in flood levels during the occurrence of the 100-year flood. I think we need to vote on that as well, since that's part of the floodplain district regulations. So I'll ask that question. Has the applicant demonstrated that such development will not result in any increase in flood levels during the occurrence of the 100-year flood? And I'll start with Joe again.
There's absolutely no evidence that it would.
Okay. Pete?
No.
No. Lisa?
There's no evidence, no.
Lisa?
I haven't seen any that would suggest there'd be an issue.
And I would agree to simply say that in my judgment, if there is any increase in the flood levels during the 100-year flood, I believe, in my opinion, that it will be minimal. But I also feel that the testimony that we received about the height of the dam compared to the height of the residence is significant. And the fact that in the huge flood we had a couple of years ago, there wasn't any impingement of water on the house or the location where this addition is going to be is an important factor. Okay? So, I'll entertain a motion on this special exception. So move. Move that we grant the special exception. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Lisa. Are we ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
You have your special exception.
All right, step one.
I'll get that shoreline.
Get the shoreline permit and be glad to talk to you about what I had to do to get my shoreline permit and zoning board approval.
All right, that's the next step. Get right to it. Thank you.
And
Yes, thank you. Thanks
Thank you.
everybody. Thanks for all of your input.
Thank you for your, thank you.
Our elevator's right in there.
Sorry?
Scary.
What?
Elevator.
Oh. Yeah, we'll see. I would have them in the elevator.
All right, we're gonna move on to our fourth thing. I hope that we can go through this quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll move through this one quickly, our last one. David Roy's requesting special exception pursuant to section 3AA. I believe the ordinance to construct a DADU at tax map 107 lot 18.
Just really quick, this is a DADU. This portion of the lot is in the residence district. The lot is split in half. Half is in the residence, half of it is in the business. The DADU is entirely in the residence district, so it does meet district requirements, and it doesn't need a variance or anything. So, staff likes the application. We do request the following conditions that we place on all of the DADUs. Building permit must be approved and issued prior to the construction of the DADU. DADU must be owner occupied. Both the primary dwelling unit and DADU must remain in common ownership. And then we also are wanting to see a new drawing that shows the height of the structure at all four sides to ensure that it doesn't exceed the height limit. And then we need to update the information on the site plan to reflect the current owner information. If you look at the site plan, it reflects information for another project. So that is what staff would like to see prior to approval of a building permit, and it would be a condition of approval. So.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
And one of your conditions was the ADU must be, the premise must be owner occupied?
Yeah, and that's an RSA requirement.
Well, exactly, so why is it one of your requirements is an RSA requirement?
It's actually in the zoning ordinance. Those requirements are all in the zoning ordinance. So,
Which, the underscored my question, why are you putting conditions on that are already addressed by zoning ordinance and or RSA?
It's historically how Swanzey has approved DAUs, and there is no mechanism in place to catch any lapse of those requirements. So if for some reason the applicant fails to do that, we have it documented in our letter going out to the applicant as just an additional layer of protection for the town. Yeah, it's how the board has conducted DADUs in the past. I'm happy to entertain other options if you guys want.
my understanding is just trying to make conditions as explicit as possible and also have backup in case there is a question about this.
Should we then, no, I'm trying to be absurd, should we list all of the requirements in our zoning ordinance?
Well,
Why do we single out those when they're already in the ordinance and you are in the RSA?
well, I think that since they're coming, this is personal opinion, right? Since they're coming to the zoning board, then we deal with the ordinance, and we only deal with the ordinance. We don't necessarily deal with the RSA, we deal with our ordinance, which may be different from the RSA, and some, it may be more stringent.
But some of these are in our zoning ordinance, so I'm
That's what I'm
not.
saying, we're dealing with the zoning ordinance. And so what he's reminding the applicant is that these have, if we approve it, then these have to be satisfied. And that would be in the letter of approval if we do it, and it would be all spelled out. And it would be like a checklist, they would check if this has been done, this has been done, this has been done. It's just a way of formalizing.
I'm happy to entertain other options at a different meeting.
You're trying to streamline the process perhaps, or
I'm trying to understand the process, not necessarily streamline it, but if there was a whole bunch of other things that our zoning ordinance says they must do. We don't have zones as conditions.
This is relatively new though, isn't it, Jay?
yes, the DADUs are relatively new, so our zoning is a patchwork of things that have been passed over many years, and some of them are more complete, some sections are more complete than others. And as you saw the ballot this spring, some of the zoning changes have to be done great many sheets of paper, and so we get at them slowly. And if we're gonna get all of the zoning to be as detailed as this, which probably we should do, it's gonna take many, many iterations. So I think this is at a higher standard of requirement than what we have in the ordinance. And I think we're getting to be more that way. That's my personal opinion. Okay, applicant is the applicant here? Lisa needs to recuse herself, so we're now at Board of 4, which means the applicant has the option to postpone our hearing.
No.
If they wish to have a full Board of 5. You're saying no, you're waiving that.
Put me in a hardship if I have to wait another month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that means that Ann, myself, Pete, and Joe will be the 4 people who will vote on this, yes?
Just a question, but doesn't Pete own the business that abuts his property?
On Spring Street?
Well, it's owned by a partnership.
Pardon?
It's owned by a partnership.
Oh, but it's not your business, I mean,
It's not my business. The land is owned by a partnership.
And
but you run the business
Yeah, I run the business.
that's adjacent to his property.
And I don't see, I'm missing.
I don't know.
the back of it is, I'll just remind everyone that Pete has he has the decision about whether he wants to recuse himself or not. And he needs to think about this and make sure that he doesn't have a bias one way or the other about this particular thing.
I did think about it. And as I would like to sit as opposed to not.
Okay.
That's how I feel. If the board has an issue with that, then that's fine, I'll recuse myself.
I don't think the board can coerce you.
No. I would not.
But we could advise you if we had strong feelings about it. Does anybody have strong feelings about what it should consider?
I do not.
Who is notified?
The partnership.
Hey, I think if Pete was in a butter, if he owned the property as in a butter, I think he would need to recuse himself.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like that's the case.
No.
So I'll leave this up to the board.
Are you a member of that partnership?
Yeah. But I still didn't, the way I looked at it, and I did look at it, I didn't think it was necessary.
Let me ask one other question then, Pete. Are you in a butter of the residential portion of this lot where this building is going to be built?
I'm not sure.
And you might be in a butter of the rear part of the lot, which is in the business district.
No,
It's a splitting hair, I'm just
Yeah.
saying.
We have 13 or 14 acres there, and he's the last on the other side. And I think your proposal is more away from me than.
Yes, yeah, my business district board is yours, not the residential.
I was comfortable with this.
Okay.
And I still.
So then we'll continue. I entertain questions from the public about this.
You know what's being built there.
You can tell us what it is, and then we'll see if there are questions.
It's a 2-bedroom ranch for my son.
Okay.
Whereabouts on the property?
You see where the stakes are? Beside,
Didn't notice.
well, there's some stakes beside my first driveway there. There's 4 stakes in the ground, kind of in front of the Corbin's house. Yeah.
So basically comments have to come to us, and then we would ask that if there's a question, we would ask the applicant. There's no dialogue supposed to be between you folks. That's the way we work here. But that said, you can tell us more about what you're going to be building, and maybe that's what I was asking for. What you said to everybody.
Yeah.
It's a 2-bedroom,
Yeah,
1,000 square feet.
it's under 1,000 square feet, 2-bedroom
Yeah.
ranch for my son. And,
Occupied by family members.
yep.
And the current dwelling, so there's another dwelling,
The house that I currently
the
live in.
house you
Yes.
own now. So one of the things they talk about is what they call aesthetic continuity. So are they going to be similar in what respects?
Well, I have a cape and it's going to be a ranch, but
Yeah, but They're just gonna be similar, is that right? In the passage? Jay?
Yeah, we want to make sure that the ordinance is there to make sure that the buildings aren't so dissimilar that one stands out over the other one and is garage.
It's gonna be similar, just one's a cape and one's a ranch, you know?
Well, you have a question?
Well, is this going to have any impact on how the businesses run, or, you know, vehicles that emerge, enter, and go to the business?
It has nothing to do with the business. There's gonna be no more traffic. Jeremy already lives with me. When he gets married, there might be one more car. Other than that,
The site plan that I saw was you have two driveways that make a horseshoe, and then off that horseshoe, the bottom of that horseshoe, there's access to the business. But the two dwellings are at opposite ends of the horseshoe sort of
Yes.
area. So if you were the two buildings, the driveway goes like this, and then the business driveway goes like that, something like that.
it just, years ago, I was in the logging business and I sold firewood and stuff, and that's what I've done out there now. I just have one dump truck. I work all by myself, and there's really no business going on there.
But there's a lot more trucks than one dump truck that goes up and down.
There's businesses further down the street from me that has nothing to do with me.
Ma'am,
Excellent.
can you say your name for the record, ma'am? Dina, and could you address the board direction, please?
Yes, so you're telling us about other businesses on the street, or what do you think?
There may be some of the larger trucks that go down to the end of the road.
From this business?
No. She's referring to, she's seen other trucks besides the one. And I have too, but they may go down to the end.
And what the applicant is telling us, I think, is that he has very limited truck.
Yes, there's other trucks down below me. There's Hooper Tree Service down there. Swanzey Oil has trucks down there. You know, I have one truck, one dump truck, that's what I have.
Okay.
So she was just clarifying that.
Right, I mean, obviously, when there's more residential density on a property, there's questions about traffic.
I understand.
And that's what we're getting at here. Other questions from the public?
Is the property being subdivided or just?
No, a detached dwelling is something, it's not a subdivision, it's part of the property. The state allows us to, people, it's partly to increase housing in New Hampshire to
I
allow.
understand that, I was just curious.
What is the requirement for additional parking spaces? I didn't see anything that jumped out at me with the plan.
Fun, you want to talk about
It's parking. I believe it's two, and looking at the ordinance now.
On the print, it says the parking's gonna be behind the house.
In the packet, on the second to last page is a memo, number 6 states that adequate off-street parking shall be provided. Principal dwelling units shall provide 2 parking spaces. The DAU shall provide 1 parking space for each bedroom. So they would be needing 2.
So there'll be 2 additional parking spaces needed as part of the plan.
Right, it's on the print right here, it's behind the house.
Where is, I'm not seeing it.
It's right here on this map, right here. Yes. I drew a little square behind the house.
It says parking.
It says parking, yes.
Yep, you see it? Right here. Right there, it says parking. Yep. Full thing, it's there.
And do we require that it delineates the 2 spaces, or is it sufficient just say, here's the area that will accommodate 2 spaces?
I believe that's true.
It was a more question. Now, do you require it to delineate where the two spaces are, or is it sufficient just to have an area that would accommodate two spaces?
I would ask the planning department about this, but I don't see why a resident would have to paint a line down the center of their driveway to show that two
It's not a
spaces.
requirement in our ordinance, and we would require it.
What's that?
It's not a requirement in our ordinance, so we would require it. It is in there.
But I just want to say, I'm not an immediate abutter, I just live down the road, and I'm supportive of the residential use of the property. So,
Thank you.
I mean, and I think the lot is adequately sized that it could accommodate that. So.
And we live right across the street, and I feel the same way.
Okay, supported, sir?
I live across the street, feel the same way.
Okay, great. Very good. All right, folks. I think we've heard all the public comment we're going to hear, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Move to the board. Are we ready for the questions, folks? Question one. The proposed use is similar to one or more of the uses already authorized in the district and is an appropriate location for such a use. And?
And we actually have several properties nearby with similar data use, and it's been a great benefit to families who are able to stay together. So.
Joe? Yes. Pete?
Yes.
And I will agree for all those reasons. Such approval would not reduce the value of any property within the district or otherwise be injurious, obnoxious, or offensive to the neighborhood.
I say it would improve the value of the property, not decrease it.
Joe?
Given the input from the abutters, I would say yes.
And Ann?
No, it would not reduce the property values.
I know.
So yes.
Wait, yes.
I was answering it positively. Is that a yes or a no in this case?
Well, if you say that it would not, you say it would not be injurious, obnoxious, or offensive, that's a yes.
Okay. That's what
Yes.
And if you say it would not reduce the value of any property, that would be a yes.
Yes and yes.
Okay, and I agree. I don't see any evidence that the property value would go down, and given the comments of the abutters, I don't see how this would be of any difficulty for people in the neighborhood. There'll be no nuisance or serious hazard to vehicle or pedestrians. Ann?
There's been no evidence to suggest that there would be, so.
Any hazard to vehicles or pedestrians?
No, there'll be no.
Joe?
No hazard.
No? I don't see this as any problem either, so. I also say yes. Adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operations of the proposed use. And this would relate to various things. Joe, what do you think?
Proper operation.
Yep.
I guess so. I don't know.
Is the proper operation of the detached accessory dwelling.
Okay, yes.
I agree with Joe, yes.
Yes. Ann?
Yes.
And I agree, given the fact that we meet the conditions that are spelled out in the ordinance, those facilities will be provided. I'm entertaining a motion to approve or disapprove this request. So moved. Moved for Joe, seconded by Pete. Any discussion? In favor? All vote.
Aye.
Aye. 4 yeses, 0 noes. You have your permit.
Thank you.
First discussion. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for your patience. All of you, thanks for your patience. Is there any other business? I will entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Adam, we asked if there was any more business. Did you have more?
I don't, I would really hammer home to read the I don't want, I'm not singling anybody. It's abundantly clear that the package is not being read prior to the meeting.
Who said they're not being read?
I'm saying they're not being read.
By who?
I'm just saying the information that's in this packet is not being absorbed, and these questions are not being formulated ahead of of time, when we could save a lot of time if the packet was being read ahead of time. I'm just saying, please read this packet ahead of time and come prepared. That's all I gotta say, thank you.
Thank you. The motion's been made, and I'm waiting for a second to adjourn.
Yeah, I'm all done.
And the second is the motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Wayne, official next time.
I don't know if I'll be here.
That doesn't stop us from going out of time.